poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson. And today's guest on the show is Martin Jacobson, who has racked up over $17 million in poker cashes in his live MTT career. His career highlights include winning the 2014 World Series of Poker Main Event for $10 million. Going to be hard to top that one on the highlight reel. An $800K score at the 2013 $111,111 buy-in one-drop high roller. A $762K runner-up finish at the 2011 EPT Deauville Main Event. And if you'll notice, Martin's World Series of Poker Main Event victory came after his other two biggest scores, which means dude's been operating at an extremely high level for a very long time, and it also begs the following question. How does conquering the Mount Everest of poker challenges affect your motivation moving forward? Martin shares his thoughts about how he stayed hungry in our conversation, as well as revealing just how razor close his poker career was to never happening at all. In today's episode, you're going to learn how getting ghosted might be one of the biggest blessings to ever happen to Martin, the story of Martin's fateful WSOP main event run, what the future holds for the great Martin Jacobson, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you one of the top players of his generation and an amazing, amazing human being, the 2014 WSOP main event world champion, Martin Jacobson. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Is it morning? It's 11:30 for me. I don't know what time it is for you right now.
It's 3:30 over here in London. So no, not quite. I wake up late usually, but not this late anymore.
Yeah, not this late. What time do you normally wake up?
I try to get up I've actually been waking up without an alarm clock around 9 or 10 p.m. or 9, 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Which I guess is, a sign of getting older, I suppose.
Yep.
Because normally, like in my younger days, at least, when I was staying up playing online all night, I would sleep until 12. Like I struggled to get out of bed before noon, usually.
Yeah, I certainly remember myself waking up at 3 or 4 a.m. after like playing until 7 or 8 a.m. at a home game or whatever, and just crashing and sleeping my life away. And now, like you said, we're getting older. I go to sleep on my own. I'm naturally tired at about 10 p.m. I'm passed out by 11. And then at like 7:30, my body's like, all right, let's go. Whereas for a decade, if I saw 7:30 a.m., it was because I was awake from the night before. I never saw 7:30 a.m.
Yeah, same. But like that's how it should be, right? Like I feel the difference as well, like in my mood and my energy levels. This is definitely the way to go. It's just a shame that I'm still playing online tournaments every Sunday and whenever there's an online series. So by then you kind of forced to switch your sleeping schedule and make your body used to staying up late, because obviously by 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6, 7 a.m. that's when you have to be the sharpest, because that's when you're at the final table and making the decisions for all the money. So it's a fine balance, because keep going back and forth.
Yeah, it's tough, and you have to, right? Like, I mean, in the MTT grind, you've got no choice, because like you said, that's where the majority of the money is won and lost in those moments at 4 and 5 a.m. And so, you just have to naturally be prepared to execute and play at a high level, even when you're extremely fatigued. And I think one thing that I miss, though, I will say this, I miss the feeling of 2 a.m. just being awake where everybody's asleep in the world and the air is cool. I always really enjoyed that feeling when I was playing poker all night and staying up. Just, it's very peaceful for me. So I do miss the 2 a.m.s, but I don't know that I miss them so badly that I want to start staying up until 2 a.m.
Yeah, I'd say it's hardly worth it. It's funny. That's like what the fighters are saying too. You know, boxers, when they're out running in the middle of the night. I remember Tyson used to go for runs when he knew that his opponents were sleeping. So kind of felt like he got an edge by staying up later than everyone else. And I think a lot of fighters, like even Mayweather, does that too.
Well, the science is out. Sleep is important. That's just
Yeah, for sure. Getting your 7 or 8 hours or whatever you need, I think definitely outweighs that feeling of superiority of staying up that late. If anything, I feel much better when I wake up super early. Like if I'm up by 7 or 8 a.m., I'm like king of the world because it's so unusual for me. Like that's super early for me. So, but ideally, like once I'm done with poker or online poker, and I can sort of set my own schedule, like I would like to see myself waking up at 5 or 6 or very late as 7 a.m.
Okay, so we're going to get there. We're going to get to what that means, when you transition outside of poker eventually. And for now, let's go all the way back as far as we can go to the beginning of your career and beginning your poker journey. Could you tell me the story of how you got involved with playing cards?
I got involved, I guess like most people, started watching poker on TV. It was during the poker boom. Poker was everywhere. It would air like in Sweden where I lived, they would air the WPT and I guess WSOP like final tables and big cash games. Like in the middle of the night. And even back then, I've always like stayed up like kind of late, so I would kind of hit that time slot and watch TV at those hours. So and straight away I got intrigued by the game, like hearing the commentators, and I realized that there was a lot of strategy behind it. It wasn't just gambling. So
how old were you? How old were you? What was your path in life at this moment?
Right. I was it was while I was in high school, so I would have been like 16, 17, maybe a little bit older, maybe like 17, 18.
Yeah, and what year were you watching the WPT? I'm not sure how old you are now.
Oh, sorry. I'm 33 now, so what's that, 16 years ago?
16 years. The math tells me that's 2005-ish.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Right around there.
So high school, 2005. Yeah, I guess in high school, probably.
Like,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. It was like the end of the poker boom. Like I entered kind of late. I think in the US, for example, like most of my friends and the people I talked to, they said that they started sort of like 2003, like 2004. So I only really discovered. I guess it's that's just the product of living in Europe, where everything sort of comes a bit later. I think that the original poker boom started in the US, right, with Chris Moneymaker winning in 2003.
Yeah, 2003. But I mean, look, finding it in 2005 while you're in high school, that's still pretty early on in the game. You didn't miss the boom. You're like just a year later. And you recognize the strategy aspect of it. Were you a competitive kid growing up? What really was it about poker that just kind of grabbed you?
I don't know if I was that competitive growing up. I played some sports, like I played hockey growing up. Once that became kind of too competitive for me, like it was quite a high level in Sweden, where even at an early age, like I think I was 12 when I quit, and you were required to show up to 6 practices a week by the age of 12. So it was kind of like all in or nothing. And at that point in my life, there was just other things I wanted to do as well. I wasn't as dedicated to hockey as maybe some of my team members. So I switched to indoor floorball and enjoyed that. It was a lot more casual, kind of similar concept, like a lot faster and easier to get to. You didn't require as much equipment and stuff.
So you switched to indoor floorball, and did you like how long were you involved in sports kind of leading up to, I guess, the discovery in poker? And I guess, what was your plan in life in high school? Did you have a plan in life? Because I guess that's a better question, because in high school I had zero plan for life. I had no earthly idea what it was that I wanted to pursue. So did you have a plan for life when you discovered poker?
Yes, I did. At that point, I did, because when I was in elementary school, when I was 14, 15, that's when you have to make a decision of like, okay, what do you want to study now? In high school, like you have to choose like your subjects and stuff, like going forward, like what is your vision? Like, what do you want to do?
No pressure for a 14.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, I was 15. Like I had no idea. All I knew was that I didn't want to continue sitting behind the school bench all day and just grind out the academic classes, because that's, I don't know, I just found it too boring. Like that didn't work for me, like that type of studying. So I knew I wanted to do something more practical. And it's actually my mom came across this culinary school. It was a culinary high school, so you would still have all the academic classes, but you would also get trained to be a chef or work in like the hotel industry, or you can choose like which way you want to go. But I realized quite quickly that this was something that I felt really passionate about, the cooking. So I knew I wanted to be a chef like straight away. And my grades in the academic classes improved tremendously as well. I think just because I suddenly had an outlet to do something practical. It wasn't just 8 hours behind the school bench all day and doing homework. It was like, and I also had, I could see a clear path. So I just enjoyed it at school by then a lot more. And it was sort of during those years that I discovered poker. So I started playing. Firstly, I was playing with my friends. Like we bought like poker set, and would play on weekends and whatnot. And then when they got fed up with the game, I realized that I was mostly winning. So I realized that I was, I had more patience than they did. No limit. Like if you run out of patience, like you're toast. So they got fed up with the game like long before I did. And I think that's when I transitioned to online poker and started playing free rolls. I found free roll tournaments were like a good way to learn, not having to risk any money. And then slowly but surely, as I started earning, working extra as a chef on the weekends, I could deposit a little bit of my money and try to run it up and try to play for real money.
It's an interesting juxtaposition of, a chef, you're feeding people, right? You're feeding people, you're serving people, you're giving them energy. It's a very just inherently fulfilling job that you do for other human beings. And poker is not the same, where your job is to bust people and to crush people and to make good decisions and be the best that you can be in a competitive environment. So I think it's interesting to me, the comparison between the two paths of being a chef and poker player. And I guess ultimately what led you to pursue poker more in earnest than a job as a chef or a career as a chef?
Yeah, so I found a pretty good balance, I think, because I was working weird hours, as you do as a chef, because you're working when the restaurants are open, and then you're staying on a bit later. So you only finish about 1 a.m. And you have to be at work at like in the afternoon sometime to prep. So I would come home at night around 1 or 2 a.m. And at that time, I was so fired up from working that poker was like the perfect outlet for me to fire up a few tournaments and do something completely different that wasn't physical at all, because I was quite exhausted from like physically, but not mentally. Like mentally, I was fired up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had such a strong passion for the game even then. So like it was just really exciting. Like it was something I really look forward to get back home and play online poker after I would finish working. So it sort of became a habit that I did. And it was in the summer or early summer of 2008 where I guess I had my first real success, where I managed to win a WSOP Main Event package. And I've told this story many times, but back then it was different because you could choose if you wanted to pocket the money, which was $12,000, which represented about a year's salary for me at the time. So it was a shit ton of money, or you could, of course, invest the money and go and play, go to Vegas. So I did the latter. And
how come? Why'd you choose to go play?
Well, obviously it was what I really wanted, but it was still a big dilemma because I knew what the responsible thing was, and and I would take the money and start saving or invest or but I also knew what I really wanted to do, and I kind of felt like it was a sort of a free roll because this wasn't money that I expected in any way, and I've actually earned them by playing poker. So like maybe this is something that I should be doing or like follow through on. But anyway, yeah, I couldn't decide, so I phoned my mom to ask for her opinion or her advice, and to my surprise, she said that of course you're gonna go play. Like what do you have to lose?
Wow.
$12,000. But yeah, I mean, she knew how much I wanted to go play, and she was cool with it. So that sort of made the decision very easy for me, I think. And I booked my flight shortly after. But I was only 20 at the time, and I didn't know anyone in poker, and none of my friends could afford to go, and I couldn't afford to bring anyone on either. That was basically all the money I had. Flights to Vegas from Sweden are very expensive, so I ended up going by myself because it was my 21st birthday 3 days before the main event. So I kind of saw that as a sort of a sign that it was meant to be.
What'd you do for your birthday that year? I hope you made friends at the WSOP and you weren't just kind of by yourself the whole time.
Yeah, I met friends on the flights actually. So yeah, it didn't take long. It was a bit of a weird epiphany, I guess, once you walk through customs, and I had never traveled on my own. And I realized that it was like that silent. This was like way before like iPods or anything like that. So like it was just just me, myself, and walking, like going to Vegas on my own. And I was thinking like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
But then yeah, I met a Swedish couple on the flight over, and yeah, they were super friendly. And we went for dinner on my birthday, and then I met some other Canadian poker players at the pool at the Palms where I was staying. And, we ended up partying, and yeah, it was a great time. I met a lot of friends that I'm still friends with today, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a benefit that wasn't really thought about. If you stay home and just pocket the money, you don't have those relationships that have lasted, for now 12 or 13 years, right? Like I have to assume that there's way more than 12K in value in those relationships that you gained and the experience that you had when you were in Vegas. And, that's a testament to the wisdom of your mom and saying like, of course you're going to play. Like, did you play the tournament to get the cash, or did you play the satellite to get the seat, right? Like, why were you playing the thing in the first place? How did that first WSOP go for you?
Yeah, that's the second part. It went as bad as it could have. I arguably was the first person to get eliminated on the third hand. So about 10 minutes into the tournament, I was eliminated.
And how did that feel?
Empty, like disappointing. And I was quite upset with myself because I felt like I didn't play that well.
Well, you only played for 3 hands, so it's pretty easy to judge whether you played well or not.
Well, I mean, it was a bit of a cooler, but today I would have been able to get away with it, but or get away from it rather. But yeah, back then, I've always been kind of hard on myself. But I was never, even though I went as bad as it could have, like the tournament itself, I never regretted the decision of, following this opportunity and going to play. I never like, oh my God, I just lost $12,000. Like that never occurred to me once. Like I never regretted not taking the money. And I think that's this whole experience like learned me a lot. Like going forward, as you said, I would never have met these people that I met, my friends that I'm still friends with today. And I think a lot of things in my future that happened after that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go.
Absolutely. And I guess you had been playing poker for a little while at that time. And so I don't know what your expectation was, but, typically playing MTTs, you manage your expectations, and like the expectation is to do the best you can. And hopefully it works out. And most of the time it doesn't. And so I think that probably played a little bit of a role there in, okay, I'm going to do my best. And if my best just isn't good enough on this day, then that's just the way poker goes sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. So some of the friends I met that they were playing a different day one. I waited to play the last day one, and I went by their room to borrow a backpack so I could fit all my food prep and all the drinks I prepared for like a long day at the table.
You spent more time preparing than you did playing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So after this experience, 2009, you went back home. What did you do? What did your life look like? Were you still, I assume you're still an aspiring chef at that point, because you said it represents like a year's salary. So you flew back home, and then where did your poker journey take you from there?
Yeah, I was working at the time at a restaurant in Stockholm. It was a fun time in my life. Like I really enjoyed it. But now once I got back, it was like a whole new world opened up for me. Now I had this experience in the bag, and I really got a taste for traveling and like going abroad and like seeing what else is out there. Because before this, like I travel like, vacations with my family, but it's not the same as traveling on your own, because I realized like, oh my God, I met all these people and I had all these experiences. Like, what else is there? So I continued to work at the restaurant, but I was like kept an open eye, and like I was immediately thinking like, what if I could get a job at a restaurant in Vegas, like one of the fine dining restaurants in Vegas? Like, would that be possible? And I started researching and like really looking into it, and I was thinking, if I do that, I could play live poker, on the side, like even better, or I can play online in Vegas. Like, who knows what? Because that's the good thing about being a chef, right? That you're so flexible. Like, there's restaurants all over the world, and it's all about really your network and who you know, and just reaching out and like asking for opportunities.
And there's a lot, right? There's a lot of restaurants in pretty much every city that exists. So you can afford to be told no very many times. All it takes is one yes.
Exactly. So I went back, continued working, and then shortly after, about a month or so, we had a staff party actually for everyone that worked at the restaurant. And during this event, I was speaking to one of the waitresses, and she mentioned that her friend was working at a Michelin star restaurant in Barcelona, and they were looking for chefs. So immediately I jumped on the opportunity. It's like, okay, well, can you get me in there? Like tell her I'm interested. So she did, and she set it up for me, and I was going to go there, and I had a place to stay and everything. So I quit my job and at the current restaurant in Stockholm. I was set to move to Barcelona and work at a Michelin star restaurant, which I had been to before, like on vacation. I hadn't dined there, but I'd been inside a restaurant. So like, again, I saw it as a sort of a sign. Mm-hmm. So I was super excited about that. And then after I quit, so I stopped working, I couldn't get a hold of my friend with the waitress. she just went MIA. Like she wouldn't respond to my
She
calls.
just ghosted you.
It was so weird. Yeah. To this day, I haven't heard from her. So I don't know what
Holy
happened.
cow. Wow.
Yeah. But I was still living at home. I didn't have many expenses. So, and I knew I could always get another chef job if I really wanted to. But instead, I took this sort of in between job opportunity or slot and started playing more poker, which is like where my real passion was right now, at least. So, and that's just kind of how it went. And then I continued playing, and then I played more tournaments, and I had some early success. I got second in the Sunday Million by August, so like 2 months later or so from Vegas. And that gave me like a little bit of a role and a little bit of confidence. And then I started playing more satellites. I qualified for EPT London, and then I qualified for EPT Budapest in October the same year. So everything went really fast, from May when I won the WSOP Main Event package to October where I qualified for EPT Budapest. And then in EPT Budapest, I managed to get third place for about 250,000 euros.
Yeah, at this point, it's like, maybe I ought to pursue the poker thing instead of the chef thing. And it's really hilarious how much of our lives, and your life specifically, hinges on such a random thing as somebody trying to hook you up with a job and then disappearing, which creates a void. And then all of a sudden you pursue poker, and then your entire life changes, right? Like that person basically ghosting you was the catalyst to your entire poker career.
Yeah, it's super weird. Like when I think back about it, like, who knows who would have planned out differently if things would have,
Who knows?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that we live such a long time on this earth, and that some of the most important things that happen to us are just somewhat arbitrary and kind of just happen in the matter of 5 minutes. And then like everything kind of changes based on this one silly thing that we just experienced. So you're killing it. You're winning a lot. Your bankroll is likely very healthy at this point when you're experiencing that much success over a short period of time in MTTs. When did you make the decision that like, okay, I'm going to pursue poker. I'm going to travel. This is what I want my life to be?
I actually never consciously made that decision. It was just sort of what happened next. Like I never applied for another chef job after that. I was just continuing playing poker. And then, but I continue. I think that was something that helped me as well to sort of relieve the pressure that I never decided that I was okay, now I'm a professional poker player. Instead, I kept the mindset of like, I'm going to continue playing poker for a while, see what happens. And then, if I'm not doing well, or if I don't feel like it anymore, I can always get another chef job. So I think having that sort of fallback plan and like sort of insurance, like I didn't quit like 6 year halfway into law school or something like that. Like I didn't make a huge sacrifice. So having that insurance, I think, was very beneficial for me to not feel that pressure that I have to perform. Otherwise, I'm done, or I've got to start from scratch.
It's a smart poker player thing to do, to be honest with you. Like I was watching Chewy on Poker Out Loud a week or so ago, and what struck me as hilarious were just when Chewy's like, I'm going to check and see what happens, right? And I think that checking and seeing what happens is such an important part of being a poker player, being able to analyze new data points as they come up instead of just having a hard line plan for I'm going to just bet the turn and then I'm betting the river, or I'm going to bet the turn and always check to induce, right? Like there are so many data points that can come our way that influence future decisions that to just eliminate them, not use them in our thought process and our planning is ultimately just, it's not good. It hampers our ability to make good decisions, hampers our ability to see doors that we may not have otherwise seen. Classic example is like, one of my students like checks back and he's like, I'm going to bluff catch rivers. But then like something happens to where it creates an opportunity where raising the river looks like it might perform just bluff catching. But because they've already verbalized, they've already put themselves in position to play the river a certain way, they don't see the other options that are available to them when they get new data points. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go about it, right? Like, let's play poker and see what happens. Like, see if it keeps going well. See if, maybe you don't enjoy it in a year or two. And because you don't have this hard line agreement that like, this is what I'm doing with my life, you can transition and go back to something that is more fulfilling to you or resonates with you more as you grow and get older. So anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying like, that seems to be the most intelligent way to go about it, because we don't know who we're going to be in 5 years. We don't know who we're going to be in 10 years. And to just say, I'm doing this forever, I think is a mistake. Like maybe, but maybe it doesn't resonate with you in 10 years based on the data, and to pursue it after it stops giving you fulfillment just seems like an incredible, it seems like a tragedy to me, quite frankly.
I agree. And it's interesting that you mentioned this, because I was having this conversation actually yesterday, that I've realized with myself, I struggle to commit to things because I know that once I'm committed, I'm 100% in. Like I'm very persistent, and I have a hard time to let go and accept failure. So I think that's subconsciously why I didn't want to picture myself or portray myself as now I'm a poker player full time, because I really didn't know really what I was doing. It was just something that caught my attention and I found really interesting, and I realized I had a little bit of maybe a natural gift, and it was something I was very drawn to. So I wanted to explore that further, but I also didn't want to commit in case I was wrong.
Yeah. I mean, or in case you change, right? Like our opinions change. I don't know who I was 10 years ago. Like that's a different human being. It looks like me. It sounds like me, but I don't recognize them. The belief system has changed. My vision, my goals have changed. What I enjoy doing has changed. Like we talked about earlier, right? Like I go to sleep now at 10 or 11 PM and I'm awake at 7:30. Like I would not have predicted that would be my life 10 years ago. So yeah, as new data gets introduced, like just kind of go with the flow, check and see what happens. Something happens to you though that doesn't happen to a ton of poker players over the course of their lifetimes. So 2014 rolls around. I assume, in the gap there, you'd been grinding away, traveling, playing poker. So tell me about 2014, because that's a pretty big year in the life of one Martin Jacobson.
Yeah. So 2014 actually started with me contemplating about leaving poker and doing something else. I wanted to. So to rewind a little bit, between 2008 and 2014, the success continued straight away, and I was very consistently winning and making big final tables on the European tour.
Looking back, what do you attribute that to? Your just success kind of straight away in the world of poker?
I don't know. I think I was just, I was honestly running incredibly well. And yeah, I think I had, a natural talent for the game, and just, I wasn't studying that much, to be honest. I was fortunate to, meet a lot of friends that I would discuss strategy with. And I think
that's studying, Martin. That's studying.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, back then there wasn't much structured studying anyway. It was like card runners. And that was about it,
Yeah.
Videos you could watch.
I've learned though, like I don't enjoy studying. Just like, oh man, there's nothing that will ruin my day more than sitting in front of Pio for like 4 hours studying one output on one hand and figuring out all the nuances. Like that is, it does not appeal to me in one bit. But like get somebody that I can talk about poker strategy with and kind of look at databases and create hypotheses and plans and like bounce ideas back and forth. Like I could do that all day for free. That's fun. it took me a long time to realize like, oh, that's a studying that resonates with me. That's my idea of, that's what gives me the path to grow as a poker player more than anything else. Cause it's fun. I enjoy doing it. And I think that like, if you're listening right now and studying doesn't appeal to you, maybe go about studying and think about, reflect, meditate on your relationship with the word and find a better way to go about it that lights you up, that makes you excited to learn and grow as a poker player.
Definitely agree. And I think going back to how the school system is set up, it's the same in terms of, well, for one, like not everyone is the same, but also like to keep it somewhat flexible to sort of tailor to the student's need rather than just try to fit everyone in the same mold. I know it's hard to do and hard to implement that sort of school structure, but I think it would be super beneficial for society overall and like our future generation, because I think that the students will get so much more out of it and be so much more happier and
Oh, I hated it. Oh, like I can't express to you how much I hated school. Like you see me here, like I like rock back in my chair. Like I have so much anxious energy that like sitting down in a desk was like, when I graduated high school, like I was like, okay, I'm going to take a year off from college because I just couldn't imagine myself being in that setting again because I hated it. I hated going to school every single day. It was not fun. And I read a statistic that is terrifying in one sense of the word, that like kids nowadays, like the jobs that elementary school students will have when they enter the workforce, 85% of those jobs don't even exist today. And if you think about the pressure that is put on kids to figure out what they want to do in the meantime for a world that is going to look totally different when they actually come of age and enter the workforce, you can just kind of see how that's a recipe for a lot of disaster, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety.
For sure. And that's obviously what I felt when I got asked that question when I was 15. So like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be like ultimately when you graduate? It's like, I don't know. Like,
I had no idea. I don't know.
I don't want to sit behind a school bench all day and like study this way that we've been doing so far. So is there any other options? Like, what's the alternative?
Yeah, I can rule this one out. Let's see what else is out there in the world.
Yeah, but I think a better way to structure it then would be to, okay, well, you're gonna start this, very broad program where you'll try all these different subjects, and then after a year we're gonna reevaluate. We're gonna reevaluate where you do well and what you like and what you don't like, and then we're gonna like try to literally form your path. And then grouping with like-minded people that are also on the same path, and I think that would just be so much more efficient for everyone.
Yeah, check and see what happens. We're like, this is the common thread of this conversation up to this, like, just check in and see what happens. Like, do I enjoy this? If I make this plan, maybe next year I don't, and then see what happens and then take it as it comes instead of trying to, just trying to predict the future, because, spoiler alert, like you don't predict the future. We can't predict what's going to happen from year to year, from week to week, month to month, or even day to day. So just take it as it comes. And there's just a lot of pressure, I think, on kids. I felt the same. And I always felt just a sense of anxiousness of, I don't know, I'm supposed to know, right? I think that's the implication, is like, I'm supposed to know how I want to spend the rest of my life, but I legitimately have no idea. And that's a very scary place to be. And yeah, just for the future generation, I think it's not necessary and not practical. And it's not how any of us live our lives as adults.
Yeah, more flexibility everywhere would do a lot of good.
Absolutely. And now let's circle back in. So 2010, 2014, tell me about your life. You said you had considered moving on from poker. Tell me about that and how that came to be, or how that came about, that thought.
Yeah. So at this point, I'd played poker for professionally for about 6 years. And yeah, I had good success doing it, but I was still looking for something else. Like I wouldn't say I was fed up with it, but like I wanted to explore other options, and I wasn't sure that this was, the path that I wanted to continue on. I didn't feel like I was progressing as much as I wanted in my game. I didn't feel like there was that many options either. Like this was in 2014, so this was like early 2014, late 2013. So it was like before all the solvers and everything, like all the tools came available for how to improve in the game. So I felt like I was just like repetitively like going from stop to stop playing tournaments and, having some success, like some setbacks and downswings and hanging around with the same people. Like I enjoy that life, but I also knew I wanted to do something else. So what I was really passionate about then was to start my own company and entrepreneurship. And I wanted to combine that with my other interests, which is health and nutrition. So I wanted to open up a sort of healthy fast food chain, sort of like a juice bar back then, which was like is very oversaturated now, and I'm glad I didn't follow that passion. But back then, it was very very trendy and a big part of my life. So I sort of dabbled with that idea. And I think I was on a little bit of a downswing in poker. So, I mean, I'm sure that contributed to exploring other options.
It always does.
Yeah. And it probably wasn't that long because I think maybe like a 6-month downswing or something like that, like nothing. But back then it felt like a lifetime. And I was like, yeah.
When you're in it, it feels like it's just never going to end. Like, you get outside of it and you're like, how could I ever be the mindset that's never going to end? And it's like this sort of cycle that just replays itself over and over and over for poker players throughout their career.
But that's the thing with poker, right? That there's no certainties. Like you have no idea when you play tournaments, at least, like zero idea when your next paycheck is going to be.
Yeah, it doesn't come in cash either. There's never any certainty. You just do the best you can and hope that it works out and you don't end up in a cardboard box on the side of the road at some point.
Yeah, I'll fall back behind the game, and like you're always during the evolution of the game, you're always questioning like, is it still beatable? You look at your graphs and you're like, who the hell is winning here? Like you ask your friends, like, oh yeah, I'm also on an 8-month downswing, like haven't won anything. Okay.
Or even worse, you're on a downswing and everybody else is on an upswing, and you.
At least that inspires me because then I know, okay, well, this person, I know I'm like we're on a similar level here.
Yeah.
And, a few places like different, like could turn things around really quickly. But when everyone I speak to also says that they're on a really long downswing and they don't know anyone else either that's winning, then that's
it's not a good sign. Yeah.
Not a good sign. No.
So
sorry to go back to your question.
Yeah.
2014. I didn't leave poker. So I went to Aussie Millions by the start of the year, and that's sort of like where I gave up on the idea of entrepreneurship, but at least put it on pause because I did pretty well there. I had I final tabled 25K and the 100K, and I went deep in the main. So it was like an amazing trip, and like I was like, I'm back.
This makes sense again. I like life. This is a good life.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and it was my first time in Aussie Millions as well. I was like, oh no, I can't give this up. Like no way. So I continued playing. Went to Vegas that year, as usual. Spent the summer there. Played the full schedule. I think I had a decent summer. I got 7th, I believe. I final table bubbled the 10K 6 max. But other than that, I didn't really do much. But it wasn't like a terrible or great summer leading up to the main event. And then the main event rolls around, and I had terrible main event record leading up to this point. Obviously starting with 2008, the following years, I could only improve at least. But I'd never made it past day 2 dinner break and the main event, which is, so most of them have been day 1 bust outs, which is, quite remarkable given how the structures,
the field,
and the field, yeah. So I think what I've screwed up in the main event the most is that by the time the main event comes, I'm so drained and exhausted from playing the full summer, and I just don't respect the tournament enough. I overplay my hand, or I get so frustrated playing with weak players, and I feel like I'm entitled to pots, and I try to force things, and in general I'm not happy with how I played the WSOP main event. But yeah, in 2014 it was sort of different. Everything just clicked for some reason. I'm not sure why. I had a really good table draw day 1, and I think I was probably the only professional player, and ran really well, and ended up bagging the overall ship lead across all flights. So that was a good start, and then it just continued that way. I kept increasing my chip stack every level. I didn't have a losing level until day 5, which was level 32 or something crazy. It was insane.
That's pretty good.
Never experienced anything like it. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it's got to go, right? It's, the main, any field with that many people, it's just somebody has to win it, and it's hard to imagine that it's you, but somebody ultimately has to, right? Somebody has to win it every single year. And when, you get good table draws, things don't fall apart. You keep building your chip stack and things just keep going. You get in a groove. That's kind of how it has to be on the road to taking down a tournament like that, because obviously you hit some significant bumps and most likely you've already busted and it's all over for you. Was there any preparation change? Because that's the thing. So me being in the cash game streets forever, the times that I've played tournaments and made a day 2, I find myself at 1 or 2 a.m. used to going to bed earlier than that, but having this adrenaline that wires me and keeps me awake till 4 or 5. And I'm like, man, how do these guys do this day in and day out? Keeping a schedule with so much adrenaline, and then trying to come down to get back to even so that you can settle down, go to sleep, get a restful night's sleep so that you're prepared cognitively to compete once again the following day. Is there anything that through your travels, what process do you use to kind of wind down so that you can reset and then attack the next day with energy?
I think it's something that you just get used to as a tournament player. I've only played tournaments since the beginning of my career, basically. So I think when you play so many tournaments as I have, it's it's just something that your body adapts to, and you've been in the same situation so many times now that it just remembers. It's just muscle memory or whatever it is, mental memory. It
makes sense. As you're saying,
that's exciting. The first time you make a day 2, you're like, oh my god, I won't be able to sleep, and you're so excited. And the first time you make a final table, it's the same thing. But once you've been in that spot a lot of times before, it's not as exciting. I also feel sometimes when I'm in a spot where it is super exciting now, it almost relaxes me more. I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with how you tackle your emotions. I think key for me is to embrace the nerves and sort of really take them in and try to use them as something positive, try to use them as energy rather to reject them.
Absolutely. Yep. That's one of my friends. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. As I'm relating it to cash games, where it's when whatever 10, 15K, and it's just over. You just go to sleep. Like you don't really carry it with you. You just cash out, take your chips back to your room, and you pass out. And there's no really unwinding because that's just the thing that happens on a day-to-day basis. And that's the world that you live in. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Once you're like just immersed in it and you're used to it, you just have to get used to it. Just experience. I've said it many times on the show, but like how does an MMA fighter get used to getting punched in the face? Well, he gets punched in the face a lot, and that's how your body hardens and you get used to experiencing it. I love what you said though, about using the anxiety as energy. You know, that's a greatness bomb. A friend of mine, Adam Creek, he's Olympic gold medalist. He said that before any like world championship rowing event, you know, his routine involved being thankful for the energy. Thank you for this anxiety. This is energy that I get to use to make me go faster, to help our team to perform at a very high level. And that's something that has stuck with me. And I found that like before any competition, before any like conversation like this or whatever, if I'm ever feeling any sort of like nervous energy, I try to frame it as I'm grateful for this energy because this energy is what's going to allow me to perform at a high level. So like, thank you for this anxiousness. Thank you for this energy.
Yeah, I think that's key to not get consumed by your emotions.
Yeah. And we're emotional creatures. And that's just whenever we try to like turn them off or avoid them, only bad things happen because you can't flip them off. You're going to feel emotions whether you want to or not. So you may as well learn how to navigate and deal with them appropriately in a way that is positive and sort of makes sense. And as you're like chip leading, doing all the things, not having a losing level till day 5, getting closer to the finish line to where it's like, holy shit, like there's an end to this thing. And I'm in the race still, you know. Could you tell me about those thoughts as you're, you know, going through day 5, day 6 in the WSOP Main in 2014?
I'm not sure there was that many thoughts actually. That I was just, if I've ever been in the zone in a tournament, like this was it. Like I was just, you know, like a machine. Like I was just grinding and like not letting myself like get emotional or like fired up about the spot or whatever. I was just trying to play my best and not, you know. And I think also because I have so much experience in tournaments and like I've been in that situation before. Obviously, nothing to the extent of the WSOP Main Event, but I was just trying to look at it as like any other tournament really, and just, you know, playing my best. And I noticed that a lot of my opponents, they were really nervous, and that sort of calms me because I know if they're more nervous than I am, then, you know, I have an advantage and I better use that advantage to my advantage.
For sure. And if you learn anything from your first WSOP, it's that you're always only 3 hands away from crashing and burning. So yeah, I mean, that I think is an underrated skill set as it relates to MTTs, because the more comfortable you are, the more prone to, or the less comfortable you are, the more prone to self-sabotage, the more prone to just kind of doing something that doesn't really make sense in a moment of, you know, when you're can't deal with the emotions of the moment and you kind of just punt off your stack, and being calm and being the person who's on the receiving end of these punts, because this is not something I hear talked about a ton, is like somebody receives all the punts that happen in an event. And so if you're the person that's just like opening your hands and being like, thank you for these chips, that's just something that almost feels like it's an invaluable thing as it relates to MTTs.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when you're on the other side of a punt that you know that you shouldn't, you know, have gotten, and you just get a complete gift. And on the flip side, it's the worst feeling when you're the one doing the punt, because you know how that person feels, and you know that that you shouldn't have punted that way. But I mean, we're all humans and we all make mistakes. I think as long as you learn from your mistakes, like it's fine. Like it shouldn't be so hard on yourself, but it's definitely easier said than done. And I'm my worst. I'm my own worst critic for sure, like in poker and in life. But so it's something, I'm working on. Try not to be so hard on myself, but it's a fine balance, I think, because I also want to make sure that I'm driven enough and I'm progressing and I'm doing my best. So it's somewhere, got to be a middle ground somewhere.
Yeah, it's easy to be way too hard on yourself, and it's easy to not be hard on yourself at all and kind of deflect all blame and of what's happening. And you do have to stay on top of it. You need that fire to improve and try to do better without totally destroying yourself in the process.
So, John, you've used neutralized flop leads in the past 24 hours, correct?
Yeah, so I got basically the slide with all the info on it on Friday evening, and yesterday I played a session of 1KNL on Ignition and played one particular pot that I remember where a fish just donked flop turn river into me, and I ended up winning with a hand that I would have folded before looking at the slide, but I ended up winning like a $400 pot instead, and the course is $99, so definitely paid for itself very, very quickly. And I think that'll be the case for even people that aren't playing as big as 5-10 no limit. Like, I think this is a course that will very, very quickly pay for itself given how much more donking there is at lower stakes. And I think one of the most common questions I see asked in the Greatness Village Slack group is, what do donks mean? How do I deal with donk bets? I think that's got to be like in the top 3 most frequently asked questions.
You ought to feel very excited when somebody donks into you because some good things are about to happen.
You said like you probably don't need anyone to teach the course, or like you can just look at the slide and learn all the info yourself. I feel like you, Brad, will have to be there because I'm almost sure that anybody who looks at the slide won't believe it looking at what they're supposed to do, and we'll have to confirm with you that like you didn't make a massive typo somewhere and that this is actually what they're supposed to do, because it's pretty shocking the optimal way to deal with fish donking into you on the flop is.
If you'd like to check out neutralize flop leads so that you're never again confused when a fish leads into you in a single raise pot, head to chasingpokergreatness.com/nuffle. That's chasingpokergreatness.com/NUFFLE. And now, back to the show.
So we'll skip to you taking it down, right? You win the 2014 WSOP main event. I'm sure lots of emotions there and kind of, a once in a multiple lifetime experience of winning $10 million, being crowned the world champion of poker and getting all the acclaim, doing the interviews. Afterwards, after you had conquered the mountain in MTTs, like what did you go through after that? Like after you had done the one thing that everybody strives to do, was there any thought of losing motivation? Is it related to playing poker? Yeah, just what was your experience like?
I know we talked about like you can't offset your emotions at any point, but I think to some extent at the final table, like that's sort of what I did. I was so focused on not getting emotional that I just almost switched off my emotional button, if that makes sense. And it's something I've tried to do like after that, but it's not possible. It's possible that the moment was so big, it was so enormous that I couldn't grasp how big it was. Because once I won, it was sort of like an overwhelming feeling. And you really didn't know what to expect, how to act, what to feel. I think a lot of my enjoyment from it was to see the excitement and the happiness on all my friends, and like that I had people to celebrate with. Because I think if I would have been alone in that moment, like it wouldn't have been, that memorable at all. So I think that's a key part of it, that and also a lot of my friends,
so you just said that if you won the WSOP main and you were by yourself, it wouldn't have been that memorable. I don't know if I'm going to buy that, but all right.
It's really hard to explain. I don't really know how else to put it.
I know what
but
you're saying, though. I know what you're saying. It does make sense that, like, the shared joy of that journey and that victory is all the better when you have your friends, the people that you love, the people that root for you. It's, it's all the things. Like I can totally see how that is like the biggest, really most important part of the puzzle.
I think a lot of the drive and the enjoyment is the process. So like getting there, like that's what I really enjoy. And then once it was done, it was kind of like, oh shit, it's over.
Yeah.
I know it sounds weird and it's really hard to describe, but and yeah, following that, it was like, so like what's next? And at that point, I've been playing poker for quite some time. I've obviously reached the pinnacle of the game. So it was sort of a decision I had to make between staying in poker. I felt some sort of responsibility of staying in poker and representing the game, and like as a world champion, you sort of, I feel like the poker community sort of expects it of you, that you should be a good role model and good front figure for the game, and so I think a lot of that kept me in the game, even though maybe my heart and my will wasn't 100% in it anymore. But I also didn't know what else I would do if I were to play poker. And I didn't really allow myself to take a break. I just kind of kept going with it and kept playing, kept traveling, kept living my life just as before. Like nothing's ever happened, Now I was a world champion, but it's just a title and bigger bankroll, but nothing else really changed. I was playing the same tournaments. I was hanging around with the same friends, living the same life, really. So I think if I could go back, I would have taken a bit of a break right after, like force myself to take a few months off to really process what happened and really question and try to realize what it is I want to do. Like
check and see what happens, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Check and see what happens. And it doesn't sound weird to me that you sort of have these thoughts because, again, like relating it back to like world champions and gold medal winners, right? This is a thing that like they oftentimes go through depression after they win a gold medal because they've trained for 4 years with one goal in mind, one thing. And then once it's done. And the thought is, well, what the hell do I do with my life now? Like, what is next? And, that can be a very scary place. And so I just wanted to say that what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me as it relates to high achievement, because it's in multiple fields, that same feeling exists for people where it's a little bit of like, I don't want to say depression, but it is a little bit of a depression where you don't know what's next. You don't know what to strive for. You've done the thing that like everybody dreams of doing. So how do you stay motivated? How do you stay happy? How do you keep striving as a professional? And really the way that you went about it seems sort of naturally one of the healthiest ways to go about it is like you just keep doing what you were doing before, the thing that made you happy, hanging out with the same friends, going to the same places, and just trying to do your best from tournament to tournament. But, you mentioned at the very beginning of this that eventually you'll be getting out of poker. And so from that time when you were playing till today, these past 7 years, tell me about like how your poker journey, how you've evolved as an ambassador and a grinder and a world champion.
It's been a long journey, and I think when you've dedicated so much time into something, it's sort of this is my career now. Like now, it's safe to say that I sort of associate myself I portray myself as a poker player, and that's sort of become my identity. So it's hard to break free from an identity that's been so ingrained. And I'm the world champion, and like in the general public's eye, I'm probably one of the best players in the world. Even though we know that's not true. But it's like it puts a lot of pressure on you to sort of continue that path, and like this is who I am, and it's scary to leave that identity and just start something else that you maybe have no experience in. But for me, it's always been about always questioning, like, what is it that I want to do? And like, is this where my passion lies right now? Is this what drives me? Is this what gives me purpose to get up in the morning and just staying open-minded and exploring other opportunities and options? And the same way, like my poker career started back in the day. Had I not, taking a shot at the satellites and won the WSOP package and then chosen to go to Vegas to play and then not be deflated after busting the third hand and continue sticking with it and keep taking opportunities as they come along, like I wouldn't be where I am today. So like, what's to say that I can't do that, take the same path in a different area, a different industry? So it's just about figuring out where that is. And I have a few options right now that I'm sort of bouncing with, and I'm trying to get something solid going. So I'm quite excited about the future. But I still, like, don't get me wrong, I'm still very passionate about poker. I love grinding, and I'll take that back. I don't love grinding as much anymore. Like, not at least like 5 days in a row, like I used to. But I still love playing the game. I still love playing tournaments, and yeah.
Do you still feel the fear of kind of leaving poker behind, and not just like totally leaving poker behind, but being more of a recreational player that plays when you have time, but not the major driver in your entire existence? Is there fear of kind of leaving that identity behind and turning the page and starting a new journey?
For sure. Yeah. But I think what inspires me is to see a lot of my friends taking that step now, and they've left poker and they're doing other things. They're, trading cryptocurrencies, or they've started their own business, or they've trading, other things.
A lot of traders in your friends.
A lot of traders, and seems that it's the obvious path, for poker players who are very analytical and they're very good at seeing pattern recognition and all that stuff. So for me, I'm not sure that that's my path. I'm more of like the creative type. Like I would be more of I'm probably a bigger favorite to start a company and try to grow that. Like I love creating things and building businesses. I love business structure and all that stuff. But what inspired me about seeing my friends take this step is that when I asked them, like, do you ever miss poker? Like, do you ever feel like, oh, I shouldn't have done this, or like, oh, I wish I could play? And most of them say no. They're like, no, like I have no urge to play whatsoever. And that's kind of interesting to me. So that makes me think that maybe if I, actually took the step and did something else, would my desire to play poker disappear? But that's also scary because, like, I don't want to give it up. So it's tricky.
I can only speak from my experience of just day in, day out professional poker player, and then switching to something else and trying to build a business. Very time consuming, very difficult. And, I do a lot of private coaching and a lot of research. And there are certainly days where I'm like, man, I would kill to just wake up, hit the gym, meditate, stretch, do breathing exercises, and then just jump in and just fucking go to war for, 3 hours, take a break, take a walk by myself, and then go back to war again. There are certainly days where that pull is very strong in my life. And I'm like, man, I have like 6 meetings today. Like I've got to do all these, like I have actual responsibilities now that I've got to show up for and do. But ultimately I think that I wouldn't go back to being a full-time grinder, because I think at least in my case, the fulfillment and joy of teaching people and making an impact in their poker career and seeing them like, one of my students had never played online poker before. He is a professional live player. He started playing at 100 no limit back in like August, and now he's playing 1K no limit and like ripped off 50K in January. And it's like knowing that like I played a role. I mean, he did the work, he performed, he moved up, he gets all the glory there. But knowing that I played a role in the development of someone and help guide them on that path is like so much more joyous and fulfilling than moving up myself, right? If that makes some sense. And so like, I think there's a lot of joy in serving other people and giving back. And even though I made way less money on this venture than I would have had I just played poker, I think ultimately I wouldn't change a thing, at least in my personal experience.
I can definitely relate to that. I've done some coaching lately as well. I did a group course with Farah Jetin. We did it now beginning of this year, actually, via Zoom. So we had 20 students in our class, and then we designed a step-by-step like tournament course, like a master course. And just having that interaction with hungry players that are willing to learn, and they want to achieve what you've achieved, and I feel like I possess knowledge and experience, and I'm very excited to share that with them. That's very fulfilling, at the end of the day. Every time I would end the class, I would feel like $1 million, like I've just like emptied my knowledge tank and my experience, and like that sharing experience is so much more fulfilling than after I finish a 10-hour grind. Like it's not even comparable. So yeah, I think it's not just about where you can make the most money and like what do you think you should do, or like what do you think you enjoy. It's what do you actually enjoy, like what's the feeling after you finish a session, whatever it is, like, because that tells you a lot about if you're doing the right thing or not. So I think venturing into coaching and realizing the fulfillment I get from that and the energy, it's made me realize that I need to create something, or I need to help other people. Like that's what really benefits me at the end of the day. Maybe not this zero-sum game that I love. I love the competitive aspect, the strategy behind it, and all of that, and the lifestyle. But it's never going to be as fulfilling. Like even if you win a tournament.
Well, it's not today for Martin Jacobson in present moment, right? Which ultimately is what matters. And I think what you're saying there, I've thought a lot about the why of, why do I feel so good? And ultimately the conclusion I've come to is that I'm helping people who I see myself in, who are on the path that I was on. And when you see somebody who's on the path that you were on, and you can guide them and give them the wisdom that you didn't have, that you wish that somebody could have given you in the moment, like that's just, there's no better feeling than you're just helping a younger version of yourself reach their goals and find their way through poker. And like, man, it's something that like I live for. Like I love it so much. Very rewarding, very fulfilling. And, yeah, I've learned about myself. It's a thing that I'm going to do. Well, I'm not going to say I'm going to do it forever, because again, I think that maybe one day it's not as fulfilling as it is today, but it's in my plans to do it for a very long time into the future, as well as playing poker too. I enjoy playing poker, making good decisions and playing big pots. I think that's something that I still find is a fun activity, testing myself against my competitors and seeing where I fit into the hierarchy of cash game poker. But serving other people, giving back is ultimately my number one joy, just as a human being in my time on this earth.
Yeah, definitely.
I do that thing where like I go on like a long monologue and I just end it, and you're like, yeah, that there's no segue there. It's just this. There's no place to bridge or move to a different thing. I do want to wrap up your journey before we head into the lightning round and ask some of the questions that I prepared. But what's next on the slate for you? You mentioned you made a course. You've mentioned that there is a life outside of poker. What do you today envision that life to look like?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So yeah, I'm trying to explore different options right now. At the moment, I'm in the process of setting up my own YouTube channel and sort of a different way to structure it. And I realized the benefits YouTube has of reaching a bigger audience and being able to share your knowledge with more people. So that's something that's I'm quite excited about. It's also a challenge for me. I'm not someone who's I wouldn't consider myself a natural in front of the camera or public speaking or anything like that. So it's been a process, and it's something I've got to practice with this group course, for example, and I can see the improvements I make from time to time. So that's very exciting and rewarding, and I want to continue that journey and get better at it, because I realize it's a very important skill to have in life, in a lot of areas.
It's humbling. We all think that we're great at public speaking until we have like a 2-minute script and it takes us 100 takes to get the thing right. And we're like, oh my God, like this is so much harder than I ever imagined it would actually be.
Yeah. Ask the production team at 888 about my camera skills. There's been a lot of retakes over the years. Over simple stuff like one-liners, like just read this. Okay. What was the second word again?
Yeah, I mean it's a skill set. It's something that you got to practice and get comfortable, and then over time you just get better at it. But like there is no just being good at something without having to deal with all the bullshit and the downside and the struggles. Like that's always a part of the journey. In pretty much any endeavor, the struggles, and eventually you get comfortable and you just are able to do a much better job. What's your YouTube channel going to be about? What is this Martin Jacobson YouTube channel? Is it poker? What's your vision for it?
My vision for it is to continue this journey and release material that I think other people would like to know of my experience, of what I've learned through poker and life so far. So that it would be a mix of poker tips, of course, nothing too like dense, like not a lot of solver works or deep hand analysis or stuff like that. Maybe some like tournament reviews with commentary. That would be fun.
I'm smiling right now because this is funny, because I see like I can already kind of see where it's going to go. And,
oh yeah, what's that?
Well, I started this show right as like a deep dive into the journey of my fellow professional poker players and just people in the industry, because I love story. Like I'm drawn to story. I love hearing about where people come from. I know that it's not like a linear path to having success in poker. There's lots of ups, lots of downs. And so that part of it, like, yeah, I love that. And I said in the beginning, like, I'm not going to do super strategic episodes. I'm not going to like go deep into that. And then I realized that that's like what my people want to hear. And ultimately, like, we're serving our audience. And because you're serving your audience, and if that's what they want, then that's just what you have to create, right? Ultimately, they dictate it. And so I can certainly see that like not wanting to be dense is going to turn into like asks for more advanced and more dense material, which eventually just turns into more dense material. And you're like, how did I end up doing this? Like, how did I get myself here?
Yeah.
But anyway.
But I mean, to answer your question in kind of broad terms, is that I'm going to check and see what happens. I'm gonna be flexible with the content. I have a lot of ideas, but then whether I go this route or that route, like that, we'll kind of see. Because exactly like you said, it's something I've learned about YouTube, is that you have to cater to your audience, because otherwise, what's the point if no one's gonna view your content? So we'll see. Hopefully, be a mix of everything. That's what I would like to do. Some performance tips, winning WSOP Main, like, what was that like? Like I have a lot of like personal stuff that I would like to share. But so far I've been quite at a private individual. I've never been a big like social media guy or anything like that. But I realized that, it's a good opportunity to explore other options and to sort of be more transparent as a person. It's better that way than to be too closed up and too private and too personal, because then you're just limiting your options.
Yeah. Anna Marquez was on the podcast who actually referred you to me. And, she was very vulnerable and talked about dealing with like depression over a number of years, and was kind of anxious about the podcast coming out because it wasn't something she's talked about publicly. And, I just told her, like, people love vulnerability because they relate to it, because that's life. We all struggle. We all fail. We all, life from the viewed from the inside is a series of defeats. It's a quote that I can't attribute to anybody right now because I think it's George Orwell, but basically like the quote is, "I never trust an autobiography full of positive things happening because everybody's perspective from the inside is just a series of defeats." And so that vulnerability is connection. That's what really is compelling to the listener, is hearing the struggles, because that reflects their own internal state and how they go about life, and how really all of us kind of go about life. And so, basically Anna just totally crushed it, and very courageous and awesome human being. And I think that like her being vulnerable was a blessing to the listener. And ultimately, I will say this about, your ventures in content creation and YouTube: follow what makes you happy too. Serving the audience is a major component, but one thing that I learned about like course creation was all the feedback for course creation that I've ever read, and I've paid lots of money to take multiple courses on making courses, which sounds funny, but that's a thing. That's what the nerds in this world do. It's always about market research and what are people buying and what are people searching for? What are people trying to find? And I found that there was a disconnect between what I wanted to create and what people were searching for. And at some point, I just kind of gave myself permission to do what I thought was the best thing I could do. And if nobody bought it, nobody bought it. But ultimately, that giving myself permission to pursue things in that way was really one of the most freeing things that I've done as a creator and as somebody who's just in a creative space. It's like, man, if I want to do something, like if you want to do something, just do it. Like, even if nobody's asking for it, even if people don't believe in it, if you really genuinely believe it's a great thing, just put it out there, follow your heart. And ultimately, you have to listen to your audience, but you still get to do what you think is best, regardless of market research, regardless of the feedback that you get. I just think that like, that's how you create things that have never existed before, right? Like if you're always creating stuff that people are searching for, where's the innovation? Where's the stuff that people aren't asking for that will genuinely help them? So anyway, that's just what I've learned over my journey as a content creator and researcher and all these things is like, if something is appealing to you and you think it's an awesome idea, then just fucking do it and see what happens.
I think it's great advice. I think it's important to be authentic and be yourself and be true to yourself. And that's sort of a benefit of being self-employed and your own boss. So you don't have anyone else to answer to other than yourself. So yeah, because I think your intention behind things also shines through your materials. So if you're not being authentic, like people will spot that straight away. I know I spot that straight away when I watch someone on YouTube, And like you say, like being vulnerable is something that's highly admirable and that everyone can relate to, because everyone's vulnerable at some point in their life. They just have different struggles, but so few of them are portrayed and transparent and in social media and even on YouTube and stuff. It's like everything's perfect all the time, but yeah, that's not reality. But it's sometimes hard to grasp reality when all you see is perfection.
Yeah, exactly. It's a distortion and it's not real. And the irony is that the best way to get ignored is to portray always that your life is perfect. And the best way to stand out is to talk about your shame, talk about where you're struggling, your weaknesses, where you're vulnerable. Like that's what, again, that's what resonates with people. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who are struggling just like us. And what are they doing on it? How do they get out of bed despite all of these struggles? How do they move forward after a product just flops and they lose a ton of money, or something happens, they get viciously attacked online, and whatever the thing may be. How do you keep picking yourself up after you get pushed down over and over and over and over again?
Yeah, and what's ironic too is that if you follow that path and that plan, then content creation becomes so much easier, right? Because everything you produce is just natural. You're just being yourself. But if you're not being yourself, then you're an actor. If you're an actor, you need scripts. You need to portray yourself a certain way that's not you. So it becomes so much harder anyway. So
yeah, and you said script, and I think that just there, if you've got to script all of your content creation on YouTube, it's probably going to take you 2 years to come out with your first video. I know that it would for me. It's just that is not the way that I thrive. And two, like, why do something if it's not authentically you? Why do something if it's not compelling? Like your spirit is not just gung ho and let's do this thing. Like you're excited to do it. Why spend even if it would be successful? That's not a life that really resonates with me, being inauthentic day in and day out, even if it's monetarily successful or builds your brand or you get whatever prestige in the community you're aspiring to get prestige in. So yeah, like for me, it's just follow your bliss. Like Joseph Campbell says, let the cards fall where they may and do the best that you can.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And so it's so important to start with the right intention, because I think if you're exploring with not being authentic and you're started implementing a different persona, and then all of a sudden that gains traction and you're having success, then you're kind of, oh shit, now I have to continue this route. And then, next thing leads to another and just escalates and gets out of hand, and you get so attached to this that then all of a sudden that's your identity. And maybe that wasn't the original plan. It was just like started as a fun thing, but now you're so connected to this identity that you just can't separate. Like,
exactly. The success just creates that. It's a trap where the success creates that, and then you feel like, oh, this is who I am, and I can't be anything else. I won't be accepted. All these things, and then it's living life as a human is tough. It's very tricky.
For sure. It was like children that are actors. Their parents put them in acting school and they become an overnight sensation and they get all these roles, and like all of a sudden they're an actor or an actress for the rest of their life. It's not easy to break that path either.
No, and that is ultimately has led to lots of tragedy, and I think we put a lot of pressure on our kids, way more pressure than we ought to as a society, because, making a decision as to what you want to do forever when you're 12 years old, like, man, that's so unfair and pretty much bullshit, because who knows where you're going to be in 13 years when your brain is more fully matured and you've had experiences and you've learned about who you are, right? Ultimately, the process is learning about who you are, and you don't know who you are when you're a kid. You're just being a kid. And then even as an adult, like, I think a lot of times we don't know who we are. We're trying to figure it out. And then when you figure it out, you need to have permission to pursue what resonates with you and pursue that path, even if it means, leaving your old identity behind. And sometimes, like in your case, that identity is very, very strong, especially because you've had very, very public success in your field. It makes it much harder to unattach.
Yeah, but even, I'm quite fortunate that I shouldn't really be that attached, because I could quit poker today, not play for a year, and then come back in a year if I feel the urge again. Mm-hmm. It's very easy. Like, I have no contract or anything that commits me to this thing. Whereas imagine you invested 4 years of your life in med school or law school. And now all of a sudden you have hundreds of thousands in student debt, or you even graduated and you started working as a lawyer or a doctor or something. And you have $1 million in student debts, and you realize that, oh, this is actually not what I want to do. Like, what do you do? Are you going to change career paths and then gradually try to grind off this 1 million in debt that you acquired, and when wasting 6 years in law school for? It's just like that's really tough, in my opinion. Like, if you find yourself in that situation, then
it could even be another path, right? It doesn't even have to be like that. That is obviously like just, I mean, that's super, super tough. And another path is like, you have a family and you have a high paying job and a career and you're providing, but you realize that it's not happy. It doesn't make you happy. You're not fulfilled. What do you do when like you're the sole earner and your family's at risk if you choose a different career path? I mean, those things, that's a terrifying proposition as well.
For sure. And I mean, in comparison, like, I'm super fortunate to not have any of those commitments.
That's true. It's easy.
You've
got it easy.
I'm a bit spoiled that
way. You're good. It's now that I think about it and it's framed in that way, your situation seems much easier compared to a lot of situations that there could be, especially, just financial independence gives a lot of options just kind of in and of itself.
Yeah.
So let's transition to a little bit of lightning round here. And before we wrap up, if you could gift all poker players one book to read, doesn't have to necessarily be about poker, what would it be?
It would be The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin.
Yeah. I talked about it like just, I think 2 days ago with another guest. It's a great book.
Yeah, I really enjoy that one. I think a lot of it correlates a lot to poker as well. Like, there's a lot of similarities with his life and maybe not life, but like his mindset, in chess, like the way the game is structured. Obviously not as much variance, but the way he thinks about performance and the competitive nature of a very competitive environment, I think resonated very much with me.
Yeah, Josh Waitzkin's the man. And now that this has come up twice, I feel like I'm getting a sign to reread The Art of Learning, because I've probably read it 3 times so far. And every time I go back and read it, I'm always blown away by something new that I learned, new perspective, something I can add to my life. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker, what would it be?
I would change the bots and like the real-time system.
That's a good one.
Eventually that's going to be the end of online poker.
It's existential. It's an existential threat. And I know that there are platforms that are spending tens of millions of dollars trying to improve security and all that stuff to kind of preemptively catch people, but it's a struggle. And it's something that, like, whenever these big problems, like whenever I have an opportunity, I think a lot about them. And this is one I've thought a lot about. And it is very, very difficult for me to come up with any sort of good solution as it relates to botting and RTA. It is a bad, bad thing.
No, but it's evolution and sort of inevitable. But I can just fight it as long as they can.
Just keep fighting it.
Switch to live poker.
I think ultimately, the one thing that will really need to happen, especially like in the United States, is severe penalties for people who are doing it, whether that's prison time, just something that is a significant penalty that dissuades most people from doing it. I think that is, I mean, what else do you do? Like, you can't, when there's no downside to it. Of course. That's one thing. Yeah.
That's one thing about the poker world. It's always been extremely bad about the repercussion of doing something unethical in the poker industry is extremely, extremely low if you compare to other industries.
Russ Hamilton stole $70 million and dude is just out there in the world, like didn't get in any trouble at all. Like, what on earth?
Yeah, there's hundreds of those, people just walking the streets like that guy, fucked up with. And imagine another one that got away with it. That's
oh god, that's the thing.
But even if you get caught, like there's no downside to it. So like, no wonder like people take risk and like, criminals gets attracted to this lucrative and opportunistic market where you can just scam people left and right, and there's no repercussion. No one's going to do anything about it. So,
yeah,
it's a shame.
It is a shame, and with so much money at stake, it's just. Russ Hamilton, that whole thing always bugged me because, like, even back in the day, I thought, like, what if there's a smart Russ Hamilton? Like, he was an idiot. Like, he was stupid, playing the biggest stakes and, like, calling down with whatever, 9 high. Just it was so apparently obvious. If he would have had, which actually makes me think way less of his poker game, too, by the way. Like, how could you, like, you're just, anyway. If it were me, as Russ Hamilton will say, you just have the highest win rate at the biggest stakes and you make bad calls and you lose, right? You just, if there's somebody out there that was doing that, man, you'd never know. There's no way to catch them. You would never know. They would just be crushing for many, many years and they would always get away with it. Like the only reason Russ got caught was because the poker community investigated and it was so obvious. In the same way that like Postle was obvious, right?
Yeah, of course. Like there's a bet for every idiot like that. There's way more smart people that are figuring this out.
I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah, I mean,
one thing that I will say about scammers and somebody in like Hamilton or the other one I just mentioned is. A lot of times people choose to scam and cheat the system when they can't beat the system fairly, or they don't want to invest the energy into learning how to beat the system. And so I think that's like one built-in advantage. There's not a lot of people who are like high-level players that also aspire to be master cheaters and thieves. So, that's a good like part to kind of break them up to where like, okay, the people who devote their time to figure out how to scam the system likely suck at poker, and because they suck at poker, they're not able to scam the system efficiently. Man, I hate saying those words, scam the system efficiently, but
yeah, but it could also be a case where a player has been at the top of the food chain for a while, and then all of a sudden they realize they can't beat the game, and then they're looking for shortcuts, and you see
yeah,
same in fighting, for example, like high competitive fighters that at the tail end of their career, they start using steroids because they realize they can't keep up, but they don't want to give it up. So
I feel, that's a weird steroid. The steroid conversation is really weird to me. Looking back at like baseball in the 90s, I don't blame them for juicing. And I especially don't blame the people who are on the bubble who's like worked their whole lives, and I just can't imagine working my whole life, seeing somebody that like I've always performed better than, all of a sudden they're getting a multi-million-dollar contract over a number of years. And like, in your heart that like, I am better than them. And yet they're outperforming me and you're at risk of your career ending. I think that is a really shitty spot to be in. And so I don't put a lot of blame in the folks that did choose to juice like in baseball in the late 90s. Because, I mean, that's their livelihood that was kind of at stake. And obviously baseball didn't care enough to clean up the game and protect their careers. So, yeah, it's just a very, very appealing alternative.
Yeah, it's just tricky with, cheating in sports. And it's also, but I think you got to draw the line somewhere. Like in fighting, it's so different because you're actually trying to hurt your opponent. So you can generate more power and be more efficient at it, then that's very unfair, and you can cause life-changing damage to your opponents. Whereas
absolutely,
in baseball, it's you hit the ball a bit longer than the other guy. Like, good for you. Like, sure, it's unfair. From
What happens when you
economical standpoint, like that guy get a better contract, but
what happens when you're scouting your opponent out and dude's in the gym juicing and you know it, right? Like, you know that that's what he's doing and that's what you're facing, right? I can see that as like, what do you do? Like, do you do it? Do you not do it?
You call it USADA.
Well, you call nowadays you call USADA.
Nowadays, not back then. Yeah.
Back then, I'm saying, like, 10 or 50 before. Ultimately, the responsibility falls on the governing body of the competition to take care of this stuff. Don't leave it in the hands of the players, because the players' incentive is typically to get a new contract, to win, to protect yourself, to perform at a high level, to win a championship. That's their incentive. And if you're not actively dissuading them, most likely there's going to be some shady shit that's going on just because they're incentivized to do so. So basically you just have to introduce, you have to disincentivize them through USADA and drug testing, and you have to bite the bullet and invest millions and millions of dollars into keeping your sport clean. I think that ultimately that's the only thing that can be done.
Yeah, like to go back to poker, like this, I don't know, the only thing you can do really is obviously confiscate the money in the account, ban the account, but that person will always be able to access a new account.
Yep, especially if it's like the app situation or something, like it's. Oh my God, what a world! Yeah, that's not even like, people called online poker in the early 2000s the Wild West. Like that is Mad Max, post-apocalyptic, everybody for themselves, kind of crazy world. Yeah,
it seems like a short-lived game and environment. Like that's not going to last not much longer, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. They're trying to make efforts to do a better job, but it's an uphill battle, that's for sure. If you could erect a billboard every poker player's got to drive past on the way to the casino, what does your billboard say?
More rake is better. No, I don't know. Every poker player can read. God, I don't know. Yeah. more rake is better. Just making fun of Negranu.
Yeah, just the Negranu troll.
Yeah. Never gets old.
We'll accept it. It is still bizarre to me that was anyway. That whole thing is bizarre to me, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, he got the challenge.
Huh?
He got the challenge at the end, so I guess it was worth. I think he spent $5,000 on the sign.
Yeah. What's a project you're working on right now that's near and dear to your heart?
Before I was venturing or decided I'm going to start a YouTube challenge, I was writing a book. I started writing a book in end of 2019. I've written by 50, 60 pages so far, so I haven't gotten very far. But yeah, it was something I was very into for a while, and now my focus sort of shifted towards the internet and like the new age. With the YouTube channel, I realized that probably a lot more efficient way to go about it, to release videos rather than chapters. Second one would be coaching, which we talked about earlier. Get a lot of enjoyment and excitement from coaching and teaching up and coming players to get the results that, hopefully similar results that I've had, and be able to be part of that journey and contribute that way.
So what's your book about?
It's sort of a mixture of a biography, like my poker journey in my life, and the skill set it takes to be a great poker player, in my opinion. So it's a lot about decision making and understanding risk, managing risk, taking risk, decision making, pattern recognition, peak performance. Like I have a lot of interesting chapters that I would like to explore. But since I haven't gone further with this book. Like, you would have thought that 2020 would have been a great year to finish the book. I realized that it might be, maybe it's not meant to be a book. Maybe it's meant to be something else. But I know I have a lot of content that I'm excited.
What does your heart tell you? What's your heart tell you, Martin? Would you rather it be a book? Would you rather it be YouTube content, or both?
Yeah, maybe both. I think writing a book is a massive project, especially if you're not a writer, especially if your first language isn't English. I was going to write in English as well. So maybe I overestimated the challenge. But I do really enjoy writing. I think I'm a much better writer than I'm speaking. But that's also where I see the challenge in the YouTube channel, where I'm forced to speak and practice my speaking, my presence in front of camera, and sharing that way rather. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a better way to start. But yeah, the book is still there, and who knows? Maybe I pivot the idea and I come up with new ideas and completely restructure it. But yeah, I still have those chapters and the outline and a few pages done or so. We'll see.
Yeah. The reason I ask is it just seems like it matters to you, right? I think that, like, books, specifically writing, is so hard. I write a daily newsletter, and it takes me like an hour to 2 hours to just write 500 words a day on telling some sort of new story and tying it into what's going on with Chasing Poker Greatness. And it's difficult, man. Writing is it's such a cognitively draining activity, and the process of, like, editing, fixing things, structuring them differently in a way that makes sense. But ultimately the reward is so great when, you do a thing and it makes sense. And then, like, the feedback is people enjoy it and you're really helping to improve people's lives. And I think that probably ultimately what will happen is you build your YouTube channel based on the stuff that you're writing about. And then when you write the book, you'll have a naturally built-in audience of people that will want to buy the book. And so it kind of just naturally feeds into one another. And then once people read the book that haven't heard of your YouTube channel, they find you that way too. So it just kind of goes back and forth and helps to build the stuff that you're building, grow your audience, and really just impact more people.
Yeah, exactly. I want to create a funnel between all my projects and just sort of align them in one lifestyle or one project.
Cool, man. If you need any help, feel free to ask at any point. I assume you're building a team for these endeavors, because this is something that I think requires an intelligent group of people. I know that, like, I have a lot of holes as it relates to the things that I'm good at or want to do. And one thing that, if I could go back in time, would be to find people who kind of offset my own deficiencies. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see what you come up with. You're an amazing human being. You've obviously accomplished a ton in the world of poker, and I can't wait to check out your YouTube channel and be inspired. And the final question here before we sign off will be, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find you on the World Wide Web?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It was great chatting with you. People can find me on my website, martinjacobson.pro, on Twitter, Martin_Jacobson, Instagram, and hopefully soon my YouTube channel, which will be Martin Jacobson.
Awesome. And when this episode launches, your YouTube channel ought to be up, and I will put the click-through link in the show page. Thank you very much once again, my friend. I'm very grateful for your time, energy. I really enjoyed our talk.
Thanks, man. It's good being here.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceyouredge, and I'll see you next time.